Hello there, thrill seekers. Today's Monday Moldy Oldie was recorded on August 22nd, 2009 in Frankfurt, Germany, at a Vietnamese Buddhist temple that some people in Frankfurt had rented in order to have a retreat. And I gave several talks, but it looks like only one was recorded, and this is it. And the question came up about whether or not Buddhism was a religion. And this is a question that comes up a lot, not just for me, but for anybody who's in the Buddhism game in the West. And there are a lot of ways to answer this question, and the way I answer it on this video is the way I usually answered it back in 2009. I think I would probably take a different approach these days, which is not to say that I think I was wrong back then. I just feel like there's other aspects of it that are also interesting, and I've said the version I said on this tape a lot already, so I'm kind of into a new way of talking about it. But I thought it was it might be kind of good to put this out there because I also agree with myself, my 2009 self here, even though I don't say it quite this way anymore. And this discussion also goes into a discussion about science and the compatibility of science and religion, and also a discussion about free will versus determinism, which is another one of these big topics. So in 12 minutes, I get into several big topics, and I think it might be an interesting video. So let's take a look at what I said about Buddhism being a religion back in the year 2009.
You said you don't think Buddhism is a religion, but you're the first in your family to...
Yeah, well...
Yeah. So you do sort of...
Well, yeah, personally, this goes back into my personal history, but I became interested in religion when we moved from Akron, Ohio to Nairobi, Kenya. And that was the first time, and I must have been about 8 years old when we moved, and I don't know when I first sort of became aware of the fact that there were all kinds of religions in the world, because we didn't even live in Akron, Ohio. We lived in a little town called Wadsworth, Ohio. It's a very provincial, little tiny rural Ohio town. And so the only possible religions were Judaism, Catholicism, and Protestantism. And they were all kind of the same thing, except that the Jews didn't have Jesus, right? And then suddenly to become aware that there were all these other religions. But so I became interested in what this thing called religion was and what value it might have. But personally, I think when you get down to it, Buddhism isn't a religion, and the reason I think it's not a religion, and there are other reasons you could say it is a religion. So the criteria for saying it's not a religion for me is that it kind of goes back to something Nishijima Roshi likes to say a lot, is that you have two fundamental philosophies that human beings have been interested in for thousands of years, which are idealism and materialism. And idealism also includes spirituality. And materialism is materialism. Both in the sense of materialism as wanting to get as much money as you can, being a very materialistic person, or the sort of Marxist materialism, in which you try to negate, or at least put aside anything spiritual or idealistic and say, well, we're just going to work with facts and figures and concrete physical objects and try to make people happy by just only dealing with those things. And all religion that I know of falls at least mainly into the category of idealism. So what religion does is it says the important thing is, well, I'm going to say the mind, but religious people would probably tend to say spirit instead of mind. But this sort of formless world which is non-material, So what you're focused on is something non-material or idealistic or spiritual, and saying that that's what's important: God and angels and moral truth and all this other stuff. And then of course the materialists, like I say, just try to negate all of that. But Buddhism doesn't negate either doesn't negate either of those or negates both of them. At least it says that neither one of these paths is true in and of itself. Like, it's not that you have to choose spirituality over materialism or choose materialism over spirituality. Both ideas are incomplete. And they're useful in their own realm, but they're not the complete answer. So what you're trying to find in Buddhism is something that is neither spirituality nor materialism. So, which is why Buddhism always accepts science. It's just personally one of the things that very much, I want to say, got me away from being interested in religion, or made me less interested in religion, is that every religion that I found had arguments with science. And this is especially true in America, where there's this, it's still bizarrely this huge debate over whether evolution is true or not. And it's such a bullshit debate, and people get so angry about it, and I can't understand why. This idea of taking the Bible literally and saying that the scientific evidence of evolution shouldn't be taught in schools and so on and so forth. It's ridiculous. So, but a lot of religions, even when I looked into the Eastern religions, a lot of them had arguments with science. I used to go, it's probably not the best example of an Eastern religion, but I used to go to the Hare Krishna temples a lot because they have terrific food. If you really want to get a really good Indian meal, go to a Hare Krishna temple. It's great. And they give it to you free a lot of the time. Because it's part of their religion to give the food. And so you take the food and you suck it. I'm not following your religion, but I'm eating your samosas. Anyway, so I listened to their lectures because I thought, well, maybe there's something to this. And they had just as many arguments with science as the Christians did. So it was very kind of off-putting to hear this, So Buddhism accepts science. I mean, at least reasonable science. I mean, there's all kinds of things that fall under the label science that are pretty hokey. But the basic idea of cause and effect, that's what science is studying, is cause and effect. So what we have in Buddhism, and Dogen writes about this, is deep belief in cause and effect. So we accept cause and effect as real. But also it goes kind of beyond that. So Buddhism isn't exactly science. One of the things that sort of annoyed me about Buddhism when I first encountered it was that I thought, when I would hear things that Buddhist teachers would say, I thought it was just science, and it didn't seem to have anything beyond science to it. And I think there are a few people who kind of make that mistake of thinking that it's all cause. It's all cause and effect, but it's all scientific, and it's not. There is you can say there is an aspect of Buddhism that's spiritual, or addresses some kind of spiritual matters, but not exclusively. It's not exclusively spiritual. Sorry for the long answer. It's just my so. Yeah, cause and effect and free will. This is one that Nishijima used to like to talk about, and let me see if I can remember his answer, because I thought it was a good answer. The basic idea is cause and effect works perfectly if you are looking at life in terms of linear time, past, present, and future. So you can always, if you take that overall view, which we tend to do, that there's a past and there's a present and there's a future, then you can see cause and effect working perfectly, and there's no argument with cause and effect. Where free will comes in is, the way he likes to say, is he says, if you have a piece of pearl on the edge of a razor, sometimes the pearl falls to the left side, sometimes the pearl falls to the right side. Which means what he's trying to say is that in the present moment you have free will, but of course that free will is conditioned by what you've done in the past. So you can't, just because I have free will doesn't mean I can levitate. Of course I can levitate. I'm just not going to show you because I'm a master. No, I mean there's certain things I can't do because my past conditions and causes that have created this person. Yeah, so you have both. But free will operates in the present moment. So at this present moment you're free to go anywhere. But once you've made your choice, that choice is also going to determine what happens to some extent in the future. So it's a kind of a funny way. One of the things, if you read Dogen, he's a good example of this, is that Buddhism always has this idea that just because things are contradictory doesn't mean they're not true. And so one of the things we're forever fighting in our minds is, well, that can't be true when that's true. But there are certain situations in which if you actually sit quietly and observe the situation, you can see that there's two things going on that your brain is not built to put together. You can't really conceptually, you can't really conceive of the idea of free will and cause and effect being mutually true. But if you're actually acting in the present moment, you can see that you have some kind of free will right now. I was going to do something bizarre, like turn over the table or something to prove it, but I'm not going to do that. I'll eat a cookie. That was my free will. But of course, the fact that the cookie is here at all causes an effect. Anyway, so that's the explanation of that one. I mean, it's one of those great mysteries.
But also scientists say that it's compatible.
It's what?
It's compatible.
Compatible? They do say it's compatible? Really? Well, I think that's good. I think, it's interesting to see that in a lot of ways science is starting to come towards Buddhism. There's a lot of things. The example everybody likes to point out, which is I think a good example, is Buddhist philosophers had the idea of the subconscious mind a long time before Western psychology got into it. You had this sort of alaya, which was the name for the subconscious mind, which is talked about for hundreds of years. And then in science, there's this idea of the observer actually participating in the experiment. This is a sort of, I guess it's not even very recent anymore, but it kind of goes against the classical scientific idea of the impartial observer who didn't interact with the experiment. Whereas now, when we've started observing things more closely, we find that we're participating in every experiment that we do or in every action. So, this idea of the oneness of the whole universe is kind of coming into effect, and it doesn't surprise me then that the idea of cause and effect and determinism and free will being compatible is also starting to creep into scientific